Imagine a world where the unknown lurks in the shadows, where fear is a constant presence, pulsing through your veins like a silent poison. In this world, children, with their innate curiosity and vulnerability, become easy targets. They are like small flames in the midst of a vast ocean of darkness, easily manipulated, easily extinguished. At the heart of these horror stories lies a cruel truth. Children are not prepared to face evil. They do not have the necessary defenses. They are unaware of the dangers lurking beyond the veil of reality. And that is why they are the preferred victims. For a malevolent entity, there is no easier target than a child, impressionable, naive, ready to believe what their eyes see and ears hear. The legend of HACHISHAKU-SAMA, born from the depths of Japanese beliefs, is a perfect example of this vulnerability. A towering, mysterious figure that appears without warning and feeds on the fear and innocence of the young. She is more than just a ghost. She is a predator, an invisible force that turns the everyday into a nightmare, leaving only a trail of terror in her wake. In this world, childhood, usually a refuge of innocence and joy, becomes fertile ground for horror. HACHISHAKU-SAMA is the embodiment of this fear, a warning that, even in the most carefree moments, evil may be watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. HACHISHAKU-SAMA, an entity whose presence is as disturbing as her name suggests, stands out as a figure that challenges understanding. Standing 2 meters tall, she towers like a menacing figure, a silhouette that dominates any environment, bringing with her a sense of unease that is hard to ignore. There is something profoundly wrong in her appearance, something that makes children, and even the bravest adults, feel a cold shiver down their spine upon seeing her. She is often compared to Slender Man, the famous faceless being who haunts forests and the dreams of many. But while Slender Man hides in the shadows, HACHISHAKU-SAMA does not need such disguise. She appears in plain sight, in broad daylight, like a living shadow that defies logic. Her characteristic sound, a puh that resonates in the air like a distant echo, is both hypnotic and terrifying. It is as if this sound carries with it a dark enchantment, a macabre melody that seeps into the mind and soul, pulling the child toward the entity. It is a sound that cannot be ignored, growing in intensity with every step the child takes, until the only thing left in their mind is the desire to follow that sound, to discover its source. But this desire is a trap, a bait set with deadly precision. The children who hear this sound are, in a way, already doomed. They are marked by HACHISHAKU-SAMA, cursed to be pursued by this terrifying figure. And the more they try to escape, the closer she gets, her sound echoing like the pronouncement of an imminent death sentence. Escape in this situation is nearly impossible, not because the entity is fast or visibly aggressive, but because she infiltrates the psyche of her victims. Fear and despair begin to corrode the mind. Hope dissipates like mist in the wind. HACHISHAKU-SAMA does not need to chase her prey. She is already inside them, controlling their thoughts, undermining their will to resist. She is a patient hunter, confident that sooner or later, the child will fall into her grasp. The true origin of HACHISHAKU-SAMA is a mystery shrouded in shadows, lost in the mists of time and superstition. Some say she has always existed, an ancient presence that haunts the edges of reality, while others believe she is an evil spirit, a yokai, born of suffering and desolation. Whatever the truth may be, one thing is certain: HACHISHAKU-SAMA is more than just a ghost. She is a force of nature, an entity that transcends human understanding. What makes HACHISHAKU-SAMA even more terrifying is the way she operates, hypnotizing and luring children with the disturbing sound she emits. This sound is like the song of a siren, sweet and irresistible, but with a promise of death instead of salvation. It is a trap that directly appeals to a child's curiosity, to that innate desire to explore the unknown, to follow a strange sound until they discover its source. But for the children who hear it, the fate is almost always the same, a journey with no return. Her appearance also contributes to her hypnotic power. With a long white dress that seems to float around her slender body and a wide-brimmed hat that hides part of her face, HACHISHAKU-SAMA presents herself as a figure of disturbing elegance. She is tall, extremely tall, a characteristic that makes her even more unsettling, as it does not fit the normal proportions of the human body. There is something supernatural about her height, something that makes people feel they are in the presence of a creature that does not belong to this world. The comparison to Lady Dimitrescu from the game Resident Evil is inevitable. Both figures share that impressive height and a presence that dominates the environment, but where Lady Dimitrescu exudes a kind of morbid fascination, HACHISHAKU-SAMA inspires pure terror. There is no charm or sophistication in her, only a silent threat, a warning that something terrible is about to happen. HACHISHAKU-SAMA is a yokai, yes, but she is much more than that. She is a reflection of the uncontrollable forces of nature, a manifestation of the deepest fears that people harbor from childhood. Her origin may be unknown, but her presence is undeniable, a force that cannot be ignored, no matter how hard one tries. For those unfortunate enough to cross her path, HACHISHAKU-SAMA is a brutal reminder that evil can hide even in the simplest things, in the sound of a repeated word, in the whisper of the wind, in the shadow at nightfall. In a rural village in Japan, where tradition and the supernatural intertwine with daily life, the story of HACHISHAKU-SAMA took shape in an incident that still haunts the local inhabitants. It was an ordinary afternoon when a boy, visiting his grandparents' house, had his first and fateful encounter with the entity. He was playing in the garden, immersed in the innocence of childhood, when something strange caught his attention, a distant, repetitive sound, as if someone was whispering a word endlessly. Puh, puh. Intrigued and somewhat unnerved, the boy looked up and on the horizon saw something he would never forget, a tall, pale figure lurking among the trees. HACHISHAKU-SAMA was there, imposing, her silhouette standing out against the sky, as if the world around her had frozen in time. The boy wasn't sure what he was seeing, but the fear that gripped him was instinctive, deep, something primal within him recognizing the imminent danger. When he told his grandparents what he had seen, panic set in at the house. The grandparents, simple people but deeply rooted in tradition, knew that what the boy described was not a product of his imagination. The legend of HACHISHAKU-SAMA was well known in the region, and they immediately understood the danger their grandson was in. Without wasting time, the grandfather picked up the phone and, with trembling hands, called a local witch, a woman known for her mystical abilities and dealing with the supernatural. The witch arrived quickly, bringing with her an air of urgency and mystery. She knew that every second counted. After hearing the boy's story, she instructed the grandparents to isolate him in a room of the house. The room had to be prepared in a special way. Salt was to be placed in each corner, a fragile but effective barrier against the malevolent presence of HACHISHAKU-SAMA. Additionally, the boy would receive a scroll, a protective amulet that he had to keep with him at all times. Once the room was prepared, the boy was led inside, and the door was closed and sealed. There, he spent hours that felt like days, alone, with only the sound of his own heart to keep him company. Outside, the silence was heavy, oppressive, as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for the outcome of this invisible battle between good and evil. When the morning finally came, and the first ray of sunlight entered through the window, the witch declared that the worst was over. HACHISHAKU-SAMA had been driven away, but the threat still lingered in the air. The witch made it clear that the boy could never visit that village again, could never return to his grandparents' house. HACHISHAKU-SAMA's presence was now linked to him, and the risk of a fatal encounter was too high. With heavy hearts, the grandparents said goodbye to their grandson, knowing this would be the last time they would see him. The boy, still trembling with fear and confusion, was taken back home, but the memory of that night never left him. He grew up knowing that somewhere, perhaps not too far away, HACHISHAKU-SAMA was still lurking, waiting for a chance to claim what had begun that fateful afternoon. Surviving an encounter with HACHISHAKU-SAMA is a task that requires more than courage. It requires a combination of luck, ancestral knowledge, and sacred protection. For those unfortunate enough to cross paths with this entity, reality becomes a survival game, where every decision can mean the difference between life and death. The first step to escaping HACHISHAKU-SAMA is to find a sacred place, a space where the presence of evil is weakened by the protective energy accumulated over centuries. These places, which can be temples, shrines, or even blessed rooms, are temporary shields against the power of HACHISHAKU-SAMA. But the security they offer is fragile, and any failure in preparation can be fatal. Luck also plays a crucial role. HACHISHAKU-SAMA doesn't pursue her victims with haste. She is patient, like a shadow that follows from a distance, waiting for the right moment to strike. If a child is unfortunate enough to see her but is not immediately drawn in, they become a target. HACHISHAKU-SAMA will follow them, slowly but inexorably, until she eventually captures them. The only hope in this case is that the parents or guardians believe the child's account and act quickly to isolate the child in a safe place. Once isolated, the child must be surrounded by protective barriers. Salt, a common element in purification rituals, is one of the most effective methods for creating a line of defense. Placed in each corner of the room, the salt forms a spiritual barrier that HACHISHAKU-SAMA cannot cross. In addition, protective amulets and scrolls are distributed, each carrying prayers and enchantments intended to keep the entity at bay. However, even after surviving an encounter, the danger does not completely disappear. The child must carry a symbol of protection, a talisman that accompanies them wherever they go to prevent future fatal encounters. These talismans are more than simple amulets. They are the difference between life and death, a constant reminder that HACHISHAKU-SAMA is never truly far away. Survival, therefore, is not guaranteed by temporary isolation or rituals performed. It is a continuous struggle, where vigilance must be constant and protection unwavering. Any lapse, any relaxation in defense, can open the door for HACHISHAKU-SAMA to return, this time without leaving a chance to escape. It is an invisible and silent battle, where the price of victory is the constant reminder that danger is still lurking, always waiting for a new opportunity. The story of HACHISHAKU-SAMA does not simply end with a happy conclusion where the danger was avoided and everything returns to normal. On the contrary, the encounter with this entity marks the lives of its victims in a way that few other experiences can. Survival, as mentioned, is just the beginning of a long and terrifying journey where constant vigilance and continuous protection become essential parts of the daily routine. Survival after an encounter with HACHISHAKU-SAMA depends, above all, on never letting your guard down. The entity is patient and relentless, always lurking, waiting for any sign of carelessness to attack again. Those who have survived once know that the danger does not disappear. It merely retreats into the shadows, waiting for the next opportunity. Constant protection is therefore vital. Amulets, talismans, and other symbols of protection need to be kept close at all times. These sacred objects, imbued with prayers and enchantments, serve as a spiritual barrier, a shield against HACHISHAKU-SAMA's malevolent presence. But their effectiveness depends on their integrity and the faith of the person who carries them. Any damage or negligence can weaken this protection, allowing HACHISHAKU-SAMA to draw closer once again. Living under the constant threat of HACHISHAKU-SAMA also means avoiding places and situations that might attract her attention. Victims and their families often move residences, abandoning old homes and even entire cities to avoid a reunion. Life becomes a series of precautions, where every decision is made with the entity in mind, always trying to stay one step ahead. But despite all precautions, the reality is that HACHISHAKU-SAMA can return at any time. There are no guarantees that she won't find a new breach, a new way to get closer. This knowledge weighs on the victims like a constant shadow, an invisible presence that never completely disappears. The life that remains after an encounter with HACHISHAKU-SAMA is lived in a state of perpetual alert, where true peace seems impossible to achieve. This constant vigilance, this need to always be prepared for the worst, ends up shaping the lives of the victims and their families. The children who were once pursued by HACHISHAKU-SAMA grow up with a sense of fear and responsibility that separates them from their peers. They know, more than anyone else, that the world is a place where evil can hide in the most ordinary things, in the calmest shadows. And that, no matter how hard they try, they will never be completely safe. In the end, the story of HACHISHAKU-SAMA is not just a story of survival. It is a story of resilience, of how those who escaped her clutches are forced to keep fighting against an invisible enemy. It is a story of how evil can leave an indelible mark, changing lives forever, and how, even in the face of the darkest forces, the will to survive and protect those we love must never waver.